Welcome to a Prevent Connect podcast, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
So I know we spoke about the National Human Trafficking and Disability Working Group, but one of the questions I would like to know is, could you please elaborate on that or how it originated?
Sure.
It's all you.
Okay. Well, it's also you, Jaden. So IOFA works with or understand what kind of gaps in services there are. So IOFA has been around since 1999 and has been primarily focused on trafficking in the United States, both labor and sex trafficking. So some of the programs that we've done most recently, we're working with Asian American organizations to help identify trafficking in Asian American communities in the Chicago area.
Okay.
Because that's one of the gaps that we saw when we looked at a map of Chicago. We see that there are all of these neighborhoods that are being served and educated and have awareness about what trafficking is, but there are a lot of gaps in the areas where there are primarily Asian American communities. So when we were starting to look at Asian American communities and trafficking, we began working with another organization called ADOPT, which is the Asian American Disability Outreach Project think tank, which Jae-Jin was a part of. And we worked together, and we had a fellow who did a lot of research on the intersection of trafficking and Asian American communities and disability.
Okay.
So all of these three that interconnected, and there was a lot of information that needed to be shared that there just wasn't enough. There just wasn't enough resources out there. So this is where we really pulled together and found out that we needed to bring together experts who work in both human trafficking and in disability communities to share our resources and to cross-train and to help each other understand how to best serve anybody who might be a victim of trafficking who has a disability.
Okay.
So from there, it was just a kind of a long path of trying to get people together. There aren't a lot of resources. This is something that's important to a lot of organizations we found. We're also part of a large coalition, a national anti-trafficking coalition called the Freedom Network, and there are a lot of very interested groups there too, and who are also a part of this human trafficking and disability work group. But even with all of these experts working on these issues, there just wasn't enough time or resources. So I guess it all came together right now. We finally found a really great group, a really great time to start focusing on this issue. And it really was fortuitous that at the same time, Lydia happened to be working specifically on this intersection with her legal fellowship. So that's a really great voice to have the legal voice come in as well, because I know that we all work in service provision. So to have all of these great voices from experts all over, that's really helpful.
Thank you. And I think the components are so important, like to have all the voices on the table, and that partnerships plays a role there. Like it may not directly, help in terms of prevention, but the fact that all these resources come together, like legal perspective, response, and service providers, and then so I think in all that work you're able to like kind of identify the risk factors as which we discussed earlier. So thank you. And you mentioned about Freedom Network. We actually did a web conference with them as one of the guests, Jean Brugman.
Oh yes.
Yes.
I saw that webcast. I knew Prevent Connect because I watched that.
You watched that? Okay, great. So I know you also have mentioned about IOFA, right?
Yes.
Okay, IOFA can be recognized. I know in identifying critical and emerging issues that threaten the well-being of the youth, as you mentioned, and with the focus on youth.
Yeah.
What are the risk factors that like your partnerships and working group has identified with working with these youth?
Well, just being young, just being under the age of 18 is a risk factor because youth are dependent on older people. They are dependent on a place to stay, a place to live, and if there is a situation, maybe if they are a runaway, if they're leaving home because of a tumultuous situation at home or a dangerous situation at home, and they're trying to find a better life someplace else on the street, they're put in a very desperate situation. So they might be in a place where they are more susceptible susceptible to being trafficked. There could be somebody who befriends them, acts like they will take care of them, and then turns around and compels them to work or to sell sex. In addition to being under the age of 18, youth who are LGBTQ are also very susceptible. Youth with disabilities, runaway homeless youth, youth who've been abused before, either sexually or physically. That's a big indicator that they could be trafficked.
So I know we've been talking about, like human trafficking and disability and like addressing the intersectionality. And I know most of our preventionists may be aware of what trafficking is, but would you like to like shed some light and of how you define or like how your organizations work towards identifying different forms of trafficking?
Sure. There's actually a national law that indicates exactly what trafficking is.
So I know we've been talking about like addressing the intersectionality between trafficking and disability, and most of our preventionists who work with these issues in their community are aware of what trafficking is. But would you like mind shedding some light on how it has been defined and how do you identify like certain types of trafficking?
Sure. Well, human trafficking is actually a misnomer. Many times people think that there needs to be some kind of transportation when it comes to human trafficking, when actually people can be trafficked right out of their home. A better name probably for human trafficking would be modern day slavery.
Sure.
And there's actually a law called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that the federal government set up in 2000 that outlines exactly what this law says is human trafficking. And that includes having any of one of the actions such as harboring, enticing, transporting, recruiting for the means of sex or labor trafficking through force, fraud, or coercion. So that means that you wouldn't even have to have some kind of physical way to keep somebody in a trafficking situation. Many times people say, well, why wouldn't they just leave if they're not physically held? But there's a lot of coercion, there are threats involved. So it makes it even more difficult for somebody who may be underage. If somebody's under the age of 18, they don't even need to show any form of force, fraud, or coercion if it's for sex trafficking.
I think that's also, and to your earlier question about collaboration, I think in because of a variety of influences, those of us working in disability issues, human trafficking, anti-trafficking issues, gender-based violence issues, counseling, mental health issues, there's a lot of pressure to be kind of insulated or siloed in that area and focus on that specific issue. Human beings are more than just one issue. We're complex. We have a variety of things going on in our lives, and what I've grown over the years of social justice work that I've been doing is to really appreciate the benefit of collaborations. As work like Jody's expertise has really good foundation about trafficking and systems and capacity building, and Lydia is an expert in the law and helping survivors navigate that process. I bring disability and cultural information and connections to other disability communities and organizations, and working together, when we reach out to disability service providers or members of the disability community, people with disabilities, and when we work on developing presentations or outreach materials, all our expertise work together to make sure that those materials or how we present the information is accessible, is going to be heard, and it's not confusing or it's not too jargony. When we work to do presentations or trainings with disability service providers to understand what human trafficking is, again, I think seeing the collaboration and recognizing, and with an intentional recognition of there's an intersection between human trafficking and disability that again, one of the things is when the disability community is seen as separate from mainstream society because of a lot of the stigma that I mentioned earlier. And with great partners and people and that within the human trafficking and other areas that are intentionally bringing disability into the work and saying it's important that we include disability as part of the conversation. It's important that as service providers, as advocacy folks, as trainers and prevention, that we are inclusive of disability, people with disabilities, because again, they are vulnerable. They are having increased vulnerability. They get victimized. They're not protected. They're not safe. They're just as more at risk and more so. So understanding that and that also and also acknowledging that disability is in every segment of society. 1 in 5 adults in America has a disability, whether that's visible or invisible. And that's a huge percentage of population. And it's in every racial, religious, socioeconomic segment there is. So being accepting of that, I think ultimately allows for people who do prevention, who do direct service, and sends a message to the disability community. Oh, they see me. Not my blindness, not my mental illness, not my deafness, but they see me as a person. And I can get some help.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So thank you for all your time and sharing about your work and your fellowship and the collaborations that are happening, which is so important and critical. I'm sure prevention community is going to be, or at least kind of helping them to reflect on how to, navigate from there. So thank you for your time again and for your insights.
Thank you for listening to this Prevent Connect podcast. Prevent Connect is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, with funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views presented on Prevent Connect are not necessarily the views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. To learn more about Prevent Connect, visit www.preventconnect.org. For more information about CalCASA's mission, or to show your support, visit calcasa.org. That's CalCasa.org.